What is going on, my fellow makers? Welcome back to Keep Making. I'm Matt, and today I'm going to show you how I turned a cartoon into a terrible mecha death machine thing. Let's get to it.
Shall we begin?
Let me introduce you to Mike. Mike is a fantastic artist, and I commissioned Mike to make me some D&D portraits you see on the left and right there. In return, Mike asked that I make him a commission of something that we both love, Obvious Plant, but more specifically, Obvious Plant's Mobile Suit Garfield. Yes, you heard that right. Obvious Plant is a parody product account, and when we saw this, it reminded me of the old Transformers from the dollar store, the terrible knockoffs. But I wondered, if those were the knockoffs and this was a knockoff, what would an officially licensed Mobile Suit Garfield look like? So, I used this World War II photo for reference, and I got started. This is the RK92 Savage from Full Metal Panic. This is a model kit I got from Hobbylink Japan. Haven't used it in a few years, so this is a good time to use it, and it's bulky enough where I think it'll look sort of jarring and off-putting. Wanted to do a Gundam at first, but the Gundam I had was just too flimsy. So we get started hammering this thing together. Okay, so real quick, I just want to show you guys my sprue organizer here. Obviously, mine doesn't get much use. That's why it's looking decrepit and it's ugly as all hell. I don't use this often enough that I care. But when I do use this, it's super helpful because just even something as simple as this with this nasty cardboard to organize my sprues alphabetically so that they're not piled on top of each other and taking up space in my workplace. This thing is great. Makes putting models together off a sprue much quicker. So if you can, build yourself something like this. So I start assembling the rest of the model, but for the head we have to obviously make it Garfield. So you see me here, I'm putting everything together, just snapping them off the sprue and then gluing them up with some Tamiya thin paint because these are plastic pieces that'll cause a weld bend. Okay, so here we go. Here is a Garfield model off Thingiverse, so this is free. I can't remember who made this model, but I'll put a link in the description for any reason if you need to duplicate this process. So I'll go into the thing files here. I just want Garfield with the head. So everything else, I think there's a John and Odie in there I don't need. So I download that, open that into a slicer. This is the Precisa slicer. The reason I'm using this one is because it has this feature here where I can create a plane and split two pieces of an STL. So I'll just eyeball this out, fidget with it a bit, and then I'm going to apply that cut, and it'll cut these two pieces in half. You can keep both pieces if you need, but I just need this one, and then I'm going to export this as an STL, and then I can work with it from there. So here's the piece that goes on top of the head that would usually key into the regular head that came with this kit. And so it's just this sort of like cross section piece you can see there with a little ball joint on the inside. So the ball joint's obviously connected to the body. So we just need to find a way to get this cross piece into this Garfield head. And the way I chose to do that was to use Tinkercad, which is the only blending sort of software I'm familiar with because I just started doing this type of stuff. So I measure this out, the little cross piece, with a caliper, and then I create those rectangles. So you can see me just to the left there creating those rectangles. I make two of those to correspond with the size of the cross piece from the model, and all I need to do here is turn these two rectangles into holes. That way this Garfield head will have a hole in it the exact size of that cross piece. I can just glue that cross piece into this cavity that'll be in the Garfield head, and voila, we have a piece. So you see me here turning that into a hole, and then all I need to do is center those two pieces underneath the Garfield head, just like that. So there's the align feature within Tinkercad. I see it's a little bit off there. If you didn't want it completely centered, you didn't need to, but that's looking pretty good enough for me, I think. And so we'll go forward with that. I'll just export this, and then we'll get to printing. So now I just opened that exported STL within the slicer. This is the most basic slicer you can use. It came with my printer. Again, I haven't upgraded to anything more advanced than this because I don't need it. No, for this anyways. So I have the Garfield here, and now you can see that cavity in the bottom of it. That cross piece from the model is going to slot in perfectly, and you see here, boom, just clicks in just like that. That's not the Garfield head I end up using, but it's the same idea, so yeah. Perfect, off-putting, upsetting, all the things. And then I just keep assembling them all. So to get that cross piece in, I'm just using a little bit of super glue and spraying it with the activator so it cures properly. Don't want to get it spread into that ball joint though, so I just use an old brush to spread it out inside. So forgot to record this part, never mind this, that's something different. I've just gone through and sanded everything. Sanding twigs, these are from Durasand. This is 120 grit. I also have some 180 grit on the back of there. Yeah, so I just sanded everything. Working on printing a new head, so we'll see how that looks when it comes, but I'm going to paint everything separately anyway, so I'm going to just go ahead and prime all this stuff. And to do that, I've got this rack here. So obviously this is just a piece of wood. I've drilled holes the appropriate size of these old paint brushes I had laying around, and I just went to Home Depot and bought these I think they're called gator clips. But this has been my setup for a couple years now. I just take these out, I will clip an item like so, hold it there, and then just prime it. And then while I'm priming each one, these have a place to stay and a place to dry. And if you wanted to, you could hit everything at once. I usually don't, just so I can get all the hard to reach places. But you know, even when I'm drying them with my heat gun, I usually have them all up on here and just, you know. So let's get to it. Then just with a quick snap of your fingers, you just prime all these models just like so, and you're good to go. Okay, so let's begin the painting process. So I'm going to give a base coat here. Here's metal medium, orange paint, airbrush medium, and flow aid. That's what I use. I'm going to be using my airbrush here, and so this is the mixture I use. It looks like that. So obviously that metal medium brings out some of those microflakes and stuff like that. So I'm just going to hit everything with a thin coat first. And then, you know, if you have an undercoat or something like that, you can keep with this thin coat, but I do go in for a couple more coats just to get a really orange feel so we really know it's Garfield. I am a really impatient painter, so you'll see me hit all of these pieces with my heat gun after I paint them. You don't need to do that if you're airbrushing or painting anything. You just let it dry like a normal person, but I am not, so I choose to speed the process up. Moving on to some of the other details, I'll just be using this Vallejo gunmetal. I use it through the airbrush to do the bigger pieces, and the smaller areas of the model I'll be hitting with the same paint later on, you'll see. So once all the base coats are down, we're looking like this. From here, now I'm going in with that same Vallejo gunmetal, air gunmetal I should say, and I'm hitting all the small details, all the areas, all the mechanical parts that I want on this model. I'm going to be hitting with this metal, and so I just spend some time and make sure I'm not hitting over any of those orange areas. There is some ways in the future we'll be able to cover up any mistakes, but for now I just want to be extra careful. Okay, so we got the middle aspects down. I ended up doing 2 coats just to get more coverage. You'll see some areas I didn't hit because that'll get covered with the ball joint. When I am painting the joints in here, I'm making sure they're still flexible before the paint dries so that when the paint does dry, they're not scraping off. Yeah, now we'll move on to painting the head. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use some yellow paint. But that same metal medium I used in the airbrush earlier to make all these colors on the face metallic like. Okay, so that's where we're at with the face. May need to clean up later, but for now we're going to move on to weathering. Obviously the best part of any sort of build process. There are some areas I need to touch up, and some crimes like this one here where I've missed with my airbrush, that I will just be weathering out of view. So the first weathering aspect we'll do is a dry brush. So I'm starting with this lead belcher from Citadel. Basically all a dry brush is taking like a flat brush. We're gonna not get it wet at all. It's a dry brush obviously, and we're gonna wipe most of that paint off onto a paper towel, and then we're gonna use just the edge of that paintbrush to hit the model, catch all the edges, and get that color that we wiped most of it off onto the model. As I just sort of brush this element here. And before we move forward, I forgot I was going to paint these black. So I'll actually want to paint these black first before I start dry brushing. So for the areas that I want to be dry brushed that are metallic, I did opt to use a brighter silver. That way it looks like these areas have been like dinged up, and so we're seeing the silver underneath, I guess. So yeah. Just going over all the metal elements. Now the fun part. So this is just a black wash. You can use a watered down black paint. You can use inks with matte medium. You can use shoe polish. I use a mixture of all three of those things to get my secret stuff here. So yeah, I'm going over the head here. We want to pull that wash out of the recesses where it's pooling too much, but let it sink into the recesses otherwise, and you get a good effect here. So you can see at the bottom there, we're getting some wear and tear, we're getting some use, we're getting some grease stains and streaks, and that's exactly what we want here. But we hit them with the black wash so we can get all those grease stains and streaks, but also to bring out all the details. But when we're done that, we're actually going to hit it with the brown wash as well. This will make him look dirty. So not only is his machinery sort of failing and being put to the test, he's also been through some tough terrain. You got to create the narrative with these pieces as you're going, create a story why they are in this current display you're showing them in at the time of this picture, I guess you could call it, or this, you know, representation of them. Obviously with the base of this guy, it's a muddy sort of terrain and stuff, and so I wanted that to show like he had been walking through that terrain as well. So that's why we chose to do that. Might need to weather the head a bit more so it matches kind of better with the rest of it. You see there's a little bit of a difference there, so I'll just do that now. It's probably more black than the brown. Yeah, pretty satisfied with how he's looking so far. Just unsettling. So now that I'm satisfied with the model, we're going to move over into making the display base. Okay, so you'll see I have some doodling in there, but I've actually changed my mind. I was going to do a piece that's sort of cornered in here, stack of like ground and then like a water thing here. Don't want to do that. I want to really try to replicate the source material photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of cut the corners, maybe come something like this. Circular sort of pattern, and this is going to be built up by XPS foam, and then we're going to cover it in a bunch of debris. So to do the debris, I'm just going to use a bunch of old pieces. These are Gunpla pieces, Star Wars action figures, modeling kit pieces, anything you could think of, failed 3D prints, stuff I bought at the dollar store, garage sales, army men pieces. You get the point. I'm just getting a bunch of this stuff and I'm going to stick it into that modeling compound as it dries, and that'll build up all of that visual interest we want on the base. Okay, so here's what we're working with. We got some bricks, I don't remember what these are called, guns here, and then just some random pieces. Oh, was that a Death Star that made it in? Oh, probably not that guy, but everything else will probably get thrown in here. Okay, now we're moving on to the actual ground formation. This is a product called Sculptamold. You can get it online, but also if you're in Canada, like I am, you can go and get Fast Mash from Michaels. And then you can add some, you know, plaster of Paris in there, or some drywall compound, and make it a little bit better. So I'm just gonna mix this up and then start applying here. Hopefully I have enough. So I lost the footage of me actually putting this stuff in there, but it's pretty simple. I'm just, you know, covering this whole base with that compound and then just sticking it in and letting it dry all together. So nothing, no added adhesive or anything like that. Next thing I gotta do is mark out where I want this guy's feet to be. So while this thing is still wet, I'm going to put him onto the base. I had to do it off camera. I needed both hands, and I lost that footage as well. So I just stuck him into the base, and you can see there his footprints are deep within there. Again, this is going to be like a muddy surface, so it's going to look like he's sinking in just because of his weight and stuff. So again, I just push all these things into that modeling compound and we're good to go. So now we'll move on to painting this base and all these weapons. So to do that, just using some craft paint from the dollar store. You don't need to use your model paint to paint bases like this. Don't waste your money. So this takes a couple coats, but painting straight onto that Mod Podge is, or sorry, not Mod Podge, that Sculptamold is pretty easy to do. It takes paint pretty well, so it just takes a couple layers to get the color we want for this mud. Yeah, you could even add some gloss, varnish, or whatever to your paint here if you wanted to really sell that wet effect. And just like on the model, when we're done that base coat, we're just going to come in with a lighter color and do a little dry brush, bring out some of the detail of that ground compound. And when you're dry brushing like this, you don't want to get full coverage. Obviously, that's why we take most of the paint off. Just want to hit the absolute highest points just to bring some dimensionality. So we're hitting the high points to give it some layer. So what I need to do now is, because I've covered all of those weapons with mud, I need to prime them so that they'll take my model paint, because they're all sort of plastic and coated paint and stuff like that. So we don't want to paint straight onto those. It'll take way too many layers to get coverage. It'll make the model stick and lose detail. So I'm just going to prime them first. That way all our paint's going to stick to them, and this will make them, you know, if we want to paint things the same color, they'll turn out the same color because they don't have weird undercoating. So now we get to actually painting the weapon. So to do that, I'm using a variation of different metallic colors. I even mix some green metallic colors in there for some of the other weapons. We're using some bronzes to paint, you know, some of the areas and some of the bullet casings, I should say. So I'm just going off with this stuff. Some dark black metals to paint those barrier things. I don't know. Someone let me know what those are called, because I'm making an ass out of myself. But yeah, just going through painting all this stuff, picking out the details where I can, and then we're going to start to weather this base and all this stuff as well. Okay, so here's how we're looking. Obviously there's still some light peeking through from the sculpting material. That's fine, it's gonna get colored in the wash, so hey, no pun intended. Oops, let me paint that scope real quick. But after the scope, we're gonna go in, I'm gonna do that off camera. We're gonna dry brush everything, give it a little bit of wear and tear. So I'm just gonna get some metal paint, same way I did on the figure itself, dry brush that onto everything, and we'll check back in. Okay, here's how we're looking now. Everything's just got a little bit more dimensionality to it, and we're gonna add even more with the wash. First, I'm gonna do some cleanup on these white areas. Some more primer got, so there's a spot of primer. The wash won't take that out. The white areas are fine, but where paint spilled over here or primer spilled over, do want to turn those back brown. So we're gonna do that now, and then the next thing you'll see is me actually doing the wash here. Yeah, so the next step is we're going to be doing a rust wash. So on all these areas that, you know, have been sitting in mud for a while, we're going to start to put a rust effect. So this is rust from Vallejo, and I just, you know, slap it on everywhere. I even come in with patina after this to show even more aging, weathering. I don't know what you want to call it. And I don't know how to pronounce this. Nihilak oxide from Citadel. This stuff. You could even just water down some teal paint, craft paint, whatever you have on hand, and that'll work fine. I used to do that all the time. I only use this stuff on, you know, smaller miniatures and maybe stuff like this. And after all the washes, here is how we are looking so far. Okay, so everything's looking good so far. You know, this, but there is one thing missing. Obviously, we can see that hand placement. And while I was sticking everything into the modeling compound, I did jam in a hole. So just like the reference photo I showed, we are trying to replicate something. And so to do that, I need this flag here. So this is just another file off Thingiverse. It didn't print properly. I'm not sure. Something must have bumped the printer, knocked it off, or the file was corrupted. Not sure. But anyways, we need a little bit longer than it printed anyway, so that'll work out fine. So I just use some needle files here to sand down the edge, and I'm just gluing a craft stick to it, a little dowel thing. I got these at Dollarama. They came in like a pack of 30, so they've been pretty handy. Glue that to the flag, and now we've got a longer sort of flagpole thing. Came with a little part that didn't print at all, and so I am just gluing a bead to the top of this. That will give us a nice bulb up top. Now I took this out to prime it. Obviously I just snapped my fingers to do that, and then we're gonna hit this with the American flag colors. So I'm gonna start with a white, just through the airbrush, and I'm using this really fine, thin masking tape. I think this is a Tamiya masking tape. Got it at a hobby store. So if you don't have this, you can cut regular masking tape into thin slices. And this is the perfect size to do stripes. I'm obviously not going to do it completely accurate, but accurate enough that people will understand what it's supposed to be. So I'll go ahead and mark off where these stripes are supposed to be. Just get the tape on there as good as I can, and then we'll spray paint this red, or not spray paint, we'll airbrush this red, and then we'll be good to go from there. Then to do the blue and starred area, I'm just going to mask off the areas that I don't want paint on, put a little strip, and then I am just coloring everything up until that strip so as to not pass that line. I'll go all the way to the bottom of that second red stripe. Now obviously even with the masking, mistakes are bound to happen, so I'm just going in with some white to clean up any areas where I spilled over and do these stars while I'm at it. To do the flagpole, I'm just using some Vallejo metal color. This is steel, and just giving it a whole once over. Finally, we'll finish the flag off with some brown wash. This actually turned out much better than I thought it would. Letting that brown wash pool in those recesses almost looked like it was a burning effect. The flag had been burnt or something, and also gives us that dirty, it's been carried through the mud look. So I love the way this turned out. So I just add some furniture feet, that way this thing won't be sliding around, it'll be a lot sturdier and be lifted off the platform. We could put all the accessories under if we need to. Then to finish it off, I'm just giving it that museum quality black rim base that I do on all miniatures. So just before the final reveal here, I just want to thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button. If you loved it, consider subscribing to the channel, checking out all my other videos when they release. Got some big projects coming just off screen here, so I'm excited for that, so make sure you're subscribed. If you're not sick of me talking, check out my podcast, the Lords of Lore podcast, talk about all things fantasy and sci-fi nerddom. I'll leave a link in the description below. Without any further ado, guys, must destroy Mondays.